Welcome to the Finding Families podcast, where each episode we explore different cases from our files. We identify and bring together family members with those they may never have known. Mostly, we look for unknown birth fathers, where the magic of DNA brings much needed answers to lifelong searchers. I am Louise Baldock, and this week I'll be talking to Bryan and his daughter Jo about their search.
I was born in March 1938 at my grandparents' house in the village of West Melton, which is part of the Rotherham Borough. And I lived there till I was 17. And then I went to live with my mother, who married her husband in September 1939, just before the Second World War started. During the marriage, she got two children, two boys, I've two half brothers. I stayed with my grandparents till I was 17, 18. And they got really old and they couldn't really, it wasn't comfortable living with old people, but they did their best. I went to live with my mother and her husband and my two half brothers when I was about 18.
You'd only just recently found out that she was your mother.
Yeah, on my 17th birthday, my grandmother told me that the person I thought was my sister was my mother. And that was a massive shock to me. I was completely taken aback and I was shocked. And it's a big thing when somebody tells you that the person you think is your sister is your mother.
Yes, absolutely.
It was a massive shock to me. That it really hit me.
But thankfully, you could go and live with them and be part of their family.
Correct. I lived there from about 18, and I got married when I was 22, and I got married from their house. And my grandfather was still living. He was a semi-invalid, and he lived there as well. So it was a bit overcrowded, but it is a situation when I left and got married in 1960.
Yes. So there was you and your mother and her husband and your two brothers and your granddad all living in the same house.
Correct.
Wow, that is a little bit overcrowded, isn't it?
Cosy, could be called.
Yes, cosy, yes.
But Nana never treated us grandchildren any differently to the other grandchildren, and I always knew her as my grandma, just as any other child did. But you never asked Dad, did you? You had all those years, really.
Yeah, that's the biggest mistake I've made in my life. When my grandmother told me who my mother was, why on earth didn't I ask who my father is or was? And I didn't. I was that shocked I didn't. And I regret that, but thanks to Joanne, we've got to a situation where now I know.
Oh, that's right.
Who my father was. It's only thanks to her.
But you were going to ask, weren't you, Dad?
I was going to ask that day when she was in hospital with meningitis. And I said to my wife, I'd come back from hospital and I said to my wife, Margaret, when we go to see her tomorrow, I'm going to ask her who my father was. But I got a phone call later on that day to go straight to the hospital. Now, when you get one of them calls, you think there's something wrong here.
Yes.
And we went anyway. We got ready and went straight away. And she died. She'd collapsed.
Oh.
She'd collapsed in the hospital ward and she died of a massive heart attack. And she was only 58.
Yes, terrible. 58.
There was nobody else to ask, Dad, whether you had your uncle who you thought had been your brother, Jack. He would have told you. He said he would.
I asked my Uncle Jack about it and he said, he said it was never talked about. And I asked the man who married my mother, I asked him, and he said same. He said it was never talked about, but that situation it was.
The only thing you knew for certain was there was a maintenance order, weren't there?
Yeah, I remember every month my grandmother would go to Rotherham, this solicitor's office in Rotherham, and I wasn't sure what it was for, and then I found out it was a maintenance order, and it paid up to being 15.
But because it was filed under the man's name,
yeah,
we couldn't find that. So that was another avenue that was yet again close to us. So no family knew anything. There was
No.
nobody else to ask. It was never discussed. The maintenance order we knew, but we couldn't access it. So we drew a complete blank.
We did, yes.
Very frustrating, isn't it? Very frustrating.
Yeah.
One of the clues we did have, but we didn't know if it were certain that I think one of your aunties mentioned that Edith had gone to work in Bradford.
Yeah.
But we had no idea if that was a family rumour or anything. So we didn't know if this man was local, if he was, we didn't know where he was. We had no clue at all. And then the DNA started happening. I've always been interested in ancestry, and I did my DNA, but of course it's too far away. It's only a quarter would be in, whereas my dad's would be half of his father's and mother's.
That's right.
So I said to my dad, why don't you do your DNA? And you were really keen, weren't you, Dad?
Oh,
you
yeah.
still wanted to know.
I still wanted to know, but it was only due to Joanne, her persistence, that we got to know things, and things worked out pretty well, really.
She's a good lass, your Joanne.
I don't know what I'd do without her.
When my dad had done his DNA, there was a few second cousins, quite a few of them living in America, and I just randomly sent a message out to them through the site and said, has anybody got any links to Bradford? And one messaged me back and said, oh, my grandma Beatrix emigrated with her sisters. They were from Bradford. So we thought, that possibly must have been true, but I couldn't do any more. And I gave up at one point. And then I watched the TV show that Davina does on Foundlings, and I thought we must be able to do it. But it was finding someone who could help us. And then I stumbled upon you, Louise, and you solved it. And I remember opening that email and feeling so excited that after years of trying, that there was the answer. And I remember it was during lockdown, where I think you could only meet in gardens. And
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. I went straight down to Dad's, and I remember, Dad, you were mowing the lawn.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah.
And I said, Dad, we found him.
Yeah.
And then you'd offered to get in touch, and I remember saying to you, I'll go and ask Dad, because I didn't know, Dad, if that's what you wanted to do, or if you just wanted a name at first.
That's right,
didn't you?
Yeah, just a name. Yeah. I mean, Morris had died.
Well, of course, well, he would have done. I mean, you were 80 by this point, so he wasn't still going to be here, was he? I think we found 2 family groups, and then eventually we found somebody in the one family had married somebody in the other family, and so we knew then that they must be your grandparents, and your grandmother's name was the same as your mother's name, Edith. But your grandfather, I think, had a fabulous name. His name was Prince Albert.
Yes.
Well, I can say that at the introduction at parties, when they say 2 truths and a lie, I always put that one in. Prince Albert was my great grandfather. Because it's true. It was.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
It's such an unusual name for an ordinary bloke, isn't it? Prince Albert, born Bradford, 1889. I mean, you just think, I wonder when he was at school if people pulled his leg a lot,
Well, he was quite a character. We found out since, didn't we?
Yes, correct. Yes, yeah.
Everybody knew Prince Albert.
He's one of
I
them
bet
people.
they did.
I think we're having a shop as well, a corner shop. Everybody seemed to know, because there'd meet that many people coming into the shop, and I think he was a well-known character around that area.
So Prince Albert married Edith in Bradford in 1909. I knew then that if they had a son, he must be Bryan's father. And when we looked, we found out that they had a little girl who died when she was only about 2. And then they had a son, Morris, and then they had a daughter, Dorothy. Yeah. So because there was only Morris, was the only son, I could then say to you, Brian's father must be Morris.
Yes, I remember you saying at the time, Louise, that unless Prince Albert had had a son with someone else, that could have possibly muddied the waters. But as it was, when I got in touch with my dad's oldest brother, Paul, had a practice psychotherapy in London, they actually knew about Dad.
If I just quickly say then that about 9 months after Brian was born, Morris got married
Yes.
and had 3 children to that marriage. So Brian, once we'd worked out that Morris was his father, we could tell him that he had a sister and 2 brothers. Well, actually, we didn't work out about the second brother because there was a bit of a gap with him. But we certainly knew that there was a brother and a sister, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
And it turned out that when Morris had died, 1990.
That's right, yeah.
That their mother told them that they had a half brother. So they knew about Dad, which I think made it easier for them. It weren't such a shock. And
Yes.
they've been so welcoming, haven't they, Dad?
Yeah,
They're absolutely lovely people.
Lovely, nice, very nice people, yeah.
I think they'll have a different accent, of course, won't they? They won't sound the same as you.
Yeah, I think they're all quite different. So they were able to tell us about Morris and Morris's life, that he was actually, he did electrics by trade. So Prince Albert had I think it was a wireless repair shop, electrics. And then after the war, he studied. And then he went to work overseas for quite some time. So Paul and Yvonne didn't see too much of the dad
That's
growing
right,
up.
yeah.
He was away a lot working. They went to university and ended up in London and Solihull. And then they had a child much later. So your youngest brother's same age as your oldest daughter.
Yeah, 63, John, yeah.
Yeah. But they've filled in the gaps. They were able to tell us why there was a maintenance order, in that whatever their relationship was, Morris didn't admit that he was Edith's baby's father, and therefore Dad's grandma took them to court. That's why there was a maintenance order.
Good for her.
Yeah. We never knew that, you see. We didn't know why there was, which was very unusual to have a maintenance order, in 1938. It was unusual circumstances. And because we had the last name, we were able to find the court order, weren't we, Dad?
That's right, yeah. We went to Rotherham Archives, didn't we?
Yeah.
And they showed us a book with the name and everything, yeah.
Wow. I don't think I've ever seen one.
No, and it's sort of because Dad knew that we were under the impression that the family might have been well off, but actually they weren't well off at all. And Yvonne, Dad's sister, told us that it was really quite a struggle to send this money, and her mum sent it every month through postal order.
Wow, through gritted teeth as well.
They didn't have a lot of money themselves, So it really wasn't anything like we thought we imagined. We thought that Edith had maybe become pregnant to maybe a married man or somebody quite well off. The actual real story wasn't anything like we thought it was.
Completely different, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how she met him. How did Edith meet Morris, I wonder?
She was working in the shop on the high street, and Morris worked with Prince Albert.
So she went to Bradford and got a job in the shop.
She did, in the shop next door, I believe, some kind of hardware shop, and she lodged with that family that owned the shop.
So that he was in one shop and she was in the next door kind of thing.
Right.
That's right, yeah.
That's right. But he moved on fairly quickly, because what age difference is between you and Yvonne?
15 months.
So he had 2 children to 2 women in 15 months.
I was born in 1938 March, and Yvonne was born in 1939 in June.
Right.
Well, there were just 15 months between me and her, yeah.
But they were both very young at the time, and, these things happen, and
They do.
it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe they weren't madly in love with each other. Maybe they liked each other, but not enough.
Maybe so.
Yeah, probably, yeah. I think to be an unmarried mother in 1938 was a bigger deal than it's happening today.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Edith your mother was very lucky that her parents
yes,
took you on and said that they were prepared to say you were their child and look
Yeah.
after you.
And they didn't just look after him, Louise, they spoilt him. His Uncle Jack told us that Grandma would bake a batch of parking and it was all for Bryan.
and
And I think that from what Yvonne has told us, Morris, when he married his wife, she had to leave all her family and go and live in Bradford. And I think it was quite hard for her. So although it was hard for Edith being an unmarried mum, at least she got to come home and be with the family.
Yes.
And my dad you had a great upbringing with your
yeah,
grandparents.
my grandparents were pretty good. I mean, in my younger days, still today, I love football and cricket. And I was a pretty good footballer. And I carried on playing till I was about 30. And then I took up cricket umpiring.
You always had football boots, Dad, and
all I wanted was a pair of football boots, a cricket ball, a bat and some stumps. That was me during my life, my younger days.
your granddad bought you football boots.
Yeah, I remember them taking me to Blackpool because my grandfather had two elderly sisters who used to have a boarding house in Blackpool, and they'd just retired, and they lived up at North End of Blackpool. And they took me to Blackpool to see them, and the only thing I wanted to do was my favourite footballer was Stan Mortensen, and still is today. And Stan Mortensen had a sports shop in Blackpool, and all I wanted to do was to go in his shop and get some football boots. And I went in, and lo and behold, he served me himself.
Oh, wow.
He served me himself. I'd be about 13 at the time, and I couldn't believe. I mean, he played for England, that man, one of the top players in that era. He scored in 1953 Cup final. He scored 3 goals for Blackpool, and that record still stands to this day. And I couldn't believe it when I went in the shop and he served me with a pair of football boots.
Wow.
I thought, well, it's unbelievable. Can you imagine an international footballer working in his own shop today?
No, I mean, after they've retired, maybe, but not while they're still playing.
Yeah, he was still playing.
Since we got in touch, so I rang Yvonne, and Yvonne told me all the story that her aunt had relayed, that she remembers hearing the rows, and Edith found out she was pregnant, and her coming back to Worth, and she was able to tell Yvonne everything. Obviously, once Morris had died, and Yvonne actually did look up Dad. She knew that he'd got 4 children. She knew that one of his daughters was called Yvonne as well.
Correct.
So Yvonne knew Bryan's name as well. Then.
She knew his
didn't
name.
just know that there was a child. She knew the child's name.
Yeah,
their brother's name.
She looked for him, and she actually had seen Dad and my son Callum had a photograph published. It is on the internet, because you were the only umpire to have a grandson that umpired with you, weren't you, Dad?
In 2014, my grandson started umpiring, and we were the only 2 in the country, grandfather and grandson, that umpired together.
How lovely.
Yvonne had seen that picture.
Yeah.
She knew he lived in South Yorkshire, but she wanted to get in touch, but she didn't know what Dad had been told, if he was open to, knowing about the answer. So she hung back as well.
It's a very, very common fear that people have on both sides about, will I be upsetting people? Will I be causing trouble? Is this all going to be a problem? Should I keep quiet?
Yvonne's such a lovely woman.
She is. She's very good. She's very nice, yeah.
She's very warm, and we all got on well.
We got on brilliant. They've been to see me at my house, and they've told me that any time I want to go to their house to visit them, I can come. But I've stopped driving. I don't drive now. I packed in
No.
driving 2 years ago. But my daughters have said, if you want to go, Dad, to see him, they'll take me.
And you talk regular with Yvonne?
Yeah,
don't
I
you?
speak. Me and Yvonne speak regularly on the phone.
They
but-
drove up to see us and they brought photographs.
Yeah,
They showed us a photograph of Prince Albert, and Dad just looks like him. Could be my dad in fancy dress.
Wow, that's amazing.
Uniform.
That's
He was
correct,
a
yeah,
police warden in the war,
yeah,
wasn't he?
that's right. Yeah,
And it looks just like Dad. John gave you Morris's silver cigarette case.
he did. Yes, yeah,
Oh, that's lovely to have something
Yeah.
that you can hold in your hand, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And all three of them, and we just feel so lucky. Dad just, you'd have been happy with the name. You never
Yeah,
expected
no.
everything, did you, Dad?
no, because it's a long time. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. You don't know. But in my instance, I've met my siblings, and we get on very, very well together. No problems at all.
I think that's all anybody could ever hope for, isn't
It
it?
is, yeah.
And to fill in all those missing gaps and to have the photographs of Morris, and you do look like Morris, don't
Yeah,
you?
I've got some photographs, yeah.
And for us as well to know that was our granddad, and
Yeah.
you know that we're from West Yorkshire. My DNA, it's all West Yorkshire, and we know why now. It was all true. There was a link
Yeah.
in Bradford.
And I spoke to John, and John remembers his dad, well, my dad as well, being a very good Crown Green bowler.
Oh,
Yeah, he was a good Crown Green bowler, but my sports, well, as I said before, my sports were football and cricket, but
Yeah, yours is not bowling, Dad, because my mum used to beat you all the time
Yeah,
at that bowling cricket at Bridlington.
what Joanne means, we used to have a caravan at Bridlington, and we used to go down to Silby Park and go at Bowling Green. And I used to play against Margaret, and she used to beat me pretty regularly. But what she used to do when she was bowling, she used to bounce them. Do you remember Barnes Wallis's bouncing bomb?
oh yes.
And then and she used to bounce them like that. But she finished up. If we had 6 games, Margaret would win 5. But
I'm not sure about the bouncing ball that you just lost.
I did.
You didn't inherit Morris's
No, I didn't.
ball.
So he liked bowling and you liked football and cricket. I
Oh,
mean, they're
yeah.
still all sport. What about electrics? Are you any good at electric?
No.
It's what?
What, electrics, Dad? He once electrocuted my mum because she was
No.
fixing the lawnmower. So
Oh, okay. Didn't pick up any of that then.
no. One similarity, Morris was very smartly dressed,
Yeah.
and Dad used to have made-to-measure suits before he met my mum.
Wow.
For every day of the week.
Really?
Oh yeah. But then he got married and had 4 children. So.
Yeah.
That put better.
Money was a bit tighter after
Yeah,
that.
it was,
So, yeah, I had to work. a lot.
When Joanne delved into it with your help, I found out I was 82 years old, and I found out who my father was. And that must be a world record, that.
Well, it's absolutely our pleasure that we managed to work it out for
Yeah.
you.
You can't believe, Louise, how much it meant to us, and it seemed like a miracle that you solved it after years of trying. I'd looked for links to Bradford, to Edith, and I did find that one auntie married a chap from Bradford, but we had no idea. So for you to solve that mystery after all those years is incredible to us, isn't it, Dad?
Yeah, unbelievable. Can't thank you enough.
Well, it's our pleasure. And if there's anybody listening out there today who would like us to do the same for them, then they only have to get in touch.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful, especially for us, because we've got this extended family now, and my dad knows where he's from. And then because they were all so happy to see us, we we find out the full story, whereas
Yes.
you settled for a name at one point, don't
Yeah, I
you?
would. Yeah. I know when my mother died in hospital suddenly, when I was going to school, my father was, and she died before I got there, I more or less gave up. I thought, well, it's not going to be. And then Joanne took it up and it's turned out lovely.
Yes, and that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So there was 40 years between your mum dying in the hospital and you thinking that's my last chance gone. And you
Correct.
actually finding out. That is the miracle of DNA. The guy that invented DNA
Yeah.
profiling only invented it in the 1980s, and we didn't start using it for this purpose until probably 10 or 15 years ago. So you couldn't probably really have found it out any earlier than
No.
you did, to be honest.
Thank goodness for modern technology.
Yeah. Thank you both very much. I really, really appreciate you doing this because I know other people will love to hear your story.
Oh, well, we've enjoyed doing it, haven't we, Dad?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Okay, take care.
Thanks, Louise.
Okay,
You
thank
too.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
bye. This has been a Finding Families production with music from Lisa Hoyle. If you have a birth family search that you would like our help with, please visit our website, which is www.findingfamilies.co.uk. Goodbye.